I don't talk much, the woman said. Her voice so quiet the wind nearly took it. But I can cook. Ethan Cole stared at her, standing in the frozen mud beside the stagecoach, holding a bag that looked older than she did. Behind him, 3 ranch hands were already laughing. The banker had sent him a housekeeper. This was what showed up. Plain as a fence post, silent as stone, not even pretty enough to make the men behave. You can cook. He repeated the words, tasting like ash. She met his eyes. Didn't flinch. Didn't smile. Yes. That was all she said. And somehow it was the first honest thing he'd heard in months. Before we continue with Lena and Ethan's story, I want to invite you to subscribe to our channel and stay with us until the very end. Please comment below with your city so I can see how far this story has traveled. Now let's return to that frozen Wyoming afternoon that changed 2 lives forever. Ethan turned away from her before his face could show what he was thinking. The men were still grinning, elbowing each other like boys who'd just seen something funny. He wanted to tell them to shut their mouths, but he was too tired for that fight. Get inside, he said to the woman, not looking back. There's a room off the kitchen. She didn't answer, just picked up her bag and followed him toward the house. The ranch looked like it was dying, and Ethan knew it. Paint peeling off the main house in long strips. Fences sagging like old men. The barn door hanging crooked on its hinges because he hadn't fixed it after the storm 3 months ago. His wife would have cried if she could see it now. But Sarah was 2 years in the ground, and crying didn't fix anything. He pushed open the front door. It stuck halfway swollen from the cold, and he had to shoulder it hard. Kitchen's there, he said, jerking his head toward the back. You'll find what you need. Or you won't. I don't know what's left. The woman, Lena. The letter had said her name was Lena Hart, walked past him without a word. Her boots made soft sounds on the floorboards. She didn't react to the dust, the cold air leaking through the windows, the stack of dirty dishes piled so high he'd stopped counting. She just set her bag down, took off her coat, and rolled up her sleeves. When do your men eat? She asked. Sundown. How many? 4, if you count me. She nodded once, turned to the stove. Ethan stood there, suddenly feeling like he was in the way in his own house. He wanted to say something else, warn her maybe, or explain why everything was such a mess, but the words wouldn't come. They never did anymore. He left her there and went back outside. By the time the sun started dropping, Ethan had forgotten about her. He'd been in the north pasture all afternoon, trying to count the cattle that were left. 32 head. He'd started the year with 60. Some had died in the winter. Some he'd sold to pay the bank. Some had just wandered off, and he'd been too tired to chase them down. When he walked back to the house, he smelled something that stopped him cold. Bread. Fresh bread. Real bread, not the hard bricks he'd been forcing down for months. He opened the door. The kitchen was clean. Not just surface clean, actually clean. The dishes were washed and stacked. The floor had been swept. The windows had been wiped down enough that he could see through them again. And on the table sat 4 plates of food that made his throat tighten. Roast beef, potatoes, carrots, gravy, the bread still steaming. Lena was standing at the stove, her back to him, stirring something in a pot. How did you... he started. You had beef in the cold cellar, she said without turning around. Potatoes and carrots, too. They were starting to rot, so I used them. I didn't even know? You weren't looking. It wasn't mean the way she said it, just factual. True. The door banged open behind him, and his men came in. They stopped dead when they saw the table. Holy hell, breathed Marcus, the oldest of them. Is that real food? Sit, Lena said. They sat. Ethan watched them eat like they were afraid the food might disappear if they looked away. Nobody spoke for the first 5 minutes. Just forks scraping plates. Bread being torn apart, the small sounds of men who'd forgotten what a real meal tasted like. Finally, Thomas, the youngest, looked up at Lena with something close to worship in his eyes. Ma'am, he said, I don't know where you learned to cook, but I ain't had food this good since my mama died. Lena didn't smile. just nodded and went back to the stove. But Ethan saw something in her face shift just for a second. Like she'd been waiting her whole life for someone to say that, and wasn't sure what to do with it now that they had. The next morning, Ethan woke up to the sound of hammering. He pulled on his boots and stumbled outside, still half asleep. The sun was barely up, and there was Lena in the yard fixing the barn door. "What are you doing?" he called. She didn't stop working. "It was broken." "That's not your job." "Whose job is it?" He didn't have an answer for that. She drove in another nail, tested the door, and it swung smooth. Then, she moved onto the fence, pulling out the rotten posts and replacing them with new ones she must have found somewhere in the mess of his workshop. Ethan watched her work. She didn't move fast, but she didn't waste motion either. Everything she did was efficient, purposeful, like she'd thought through every step before she started. "Where'd you learn to do that?" he asked. "My father was a carpenter," she said. "He believed women should know how to fix things. Most women don't. Most women aren't alone." The words hit him harder than they should have. He wanted to ask what she meant, but she was already moving on to the next post. Three days later, something happened that made Ethan realize Lena Hart wasn't just good at fixing things. She saw things. He was in the kitchen drinking coffee and pretending to read the ledger that showed exactly how deep in debt he was when she came in from the morning chores. "Your cattle are sick," she said. He looked up. "What?" "The ones in the south pasture. 3 of them have discharge around their eyes. 2 are coughing. If you don't separate them now, you'll lose the whole herd." Ethan stared at her. He'd been with those cattle yesterday. He hadn't noticed anything. "How do you know?" "I looked." He went out to check. She was right. He found the sick animals exactly where she said they'd be, showing exactly the symptoms she'd described. He spent the rest of the day moving them to a separate pen, treating them with what little medicine he had left. When he came back to the house that evening, exhausted and worried, Lena had dinner waiting. "How did you know?" he asked, sitting down hard in his chair. "About the cattle." "About any of it. The fence. The door. The cattle. You've been here 3 days and you've seen more than I have in 3 months." She was quiet for a moment, serving him his plate. "Sometimes," she said slowly, "when you stop talking, you start noticing." The town noticed her before Ethan expected them to. It happened on Sunday when he took her to church. He hadn't wanted to go. He'd stopped going after Sarah died, but Lena had asked so quietly that he couldn't think of a reason to refuse. The looks started the moment they walked in. Women whispering behind their hands. Men staring. Ethan felt his jaw tighten. He knew what they were thinking. Strange woman. Plain woman. Living alone with a man on his ranch. But Lena didn't react. She just sat beside him, hands folded in her lap, eyes forward. After the service, Martha Henderson cornered them on the church steps. "Mr. Cole," she said, her voice dripping with false sweetness, "I don't believe we've met your friend." "Housekeeper," Ethan said flatly. "Lena Hart." Martha's eyes raked over Lena like she was taking inventory. "How nice. And where are you from, dear?" "East," Lena said. "East? Where?" "Just east." The smile on Martha's face went brittle. She wasn't used to people refusing to answer her questions. "Well," she said, turning back to Ethan, "I do hope you're being careful, Mr. Cole. A man in your position, a widower with a ranch, you do attract a certain type of attention." Ethan felt heat rising in his chest. "Mrs. Henderson." But Lena touched his arm just once, very lightly. "It was nice to meet you," she said to Martha, her voice still quiet, but somehow final. Then she turned and walked toward the wagon. Ethan followed her, anger still simmering in his throat. When they were out of earshot, he said, "I'm sorry about that. Martha Henderson thinks she runs this town." "Maybe she does," Lena said. She climbed up onto the wagon seat. But she doesn't run your ranch. Ike. That night, Ethan couldn't sleep. He kept thinking about what Martha had said, about what the whole town must be saying, about how it looked having Lena there. He found her in the kitchen at midnight, sitting at the table with a book. Can't sleep either, he asked. She looked up, marked her place, and closed the book. Sometimes. He sat down across from her. In the lamplight she looked different, softer, almost pretty if you looked past the plain dress and the hair pulled back so tight. What are you reading? He asked. She turned the book so he could see the cover. Medical text. He blinked. Medical. My mother was a midwife. She taught me. Why didn't you say something? You hired me to cook. Lena. He stopped, not sure what he wanted to say. People are going to talk. About you being here, about us. I know. Does that bother you? She was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, People have been talking about me my whole life, Mr. Cole. I've learned not to listen. What do they say? That I'm strange, that I'm too quiet, that no man would want me. She said it without emotion, like she was reading from a list. That there's something wrong with a woman who reads medical books instead of gossiping with other women. Ethan felt something twist in his chest. There's nothing wrong with you. She looked at him, then really looked at him, and he saw something in her eyes that made him look away. Thank you, she said quietly. But you don't have to say that. I mean it. She stood up, gathering her book. Good night, Mr. Cole. Ethan, he said before he could stop himself. You can call me Ethan. She paused in the doorway. Good night, Ethan. After she left, he sat there for a long time, wondering when the house had started feeling less empty. The first real test came 2 weeks later. Ethan was in town meeting with the bank, another humiliating conversation about extensions and payments he couldn't make when he heard the commotion in the street. A crowd had gathered outside the general store. He pushed through and found a man lying on the ground, his face gray, clutching his chest. Someone get the doctor, a woman was screaming. Doctor's gone to Cheyenne, someone else said. Won't be back for 3 days. Ethan's stomach dropped. He recognized the man. Samuel Porter. Good man, had a wife and 4 kids. And then Lena was there pushing through the crowd, dropping to her knees beside Samuel. What are you doing? Martha Henderson shrieked. Get away from him! Lena ignored her. She put her fingers on Samuel's neck, checking his pulse. Then she looked up at the crowd. I need someone to help me get him inside, she said. Her voice was steady, calm. Now! Nobody moved. She's not a doctor, Martha said. She can't. He's dying. Lena cut her off, her voice sharp for the first time since Ethan had met her. If someone doesn't help me right now, he's going to die in this street. So you can either stand there talking, or you can do something useful. Ethan moved before he thought about it. He bent down and lifted Samuel under the arms. Thomas, who'd been watching from across the street, grabbed his legs. They carried him into the store, laid him on the counter. Lena was already opening her bag, the same worn bag she'd arrived with, pulling out supplies Ethan didn't recognize. Everyone out, she said, except you. She pointed at Ethan. I need you to hold him still. For the next 20 minutes, Ethan watched Lena work. She moved with absolute certainty, no hesitation, no doubt. She gave Samuel something from a small bottle, checked his heart, monitored his breathing, talked to him in a low, steady voice, telling him exactly what she was doing and why. Slowly, the gray color faded from Samuel's face. His breathing steadied. His eyes opened. Mr. Porter, Lena said, you've had a heart episode. You're going to be all right, but you need to rest. No heavy work for at least 2 weeks, and you need to see a real doctor as soon as one's available. Samuel stared at her like she'd just walked on water. You saved my life. I helped, she corrected. Your body did the rest. When they finally brought Samuel home to his wife, the whole town was waiting in the street. Word had spread. The strange woman from Ethan Cole's ranch had brought a dead man back to life. Ethan saw the way they looked at her now. Not with suspicion anymore. With something else. Something that made the hair on the back of his neck stand up. They wanted something from her. And he knew Lena would give it because that's who she was. But he also knew that kind of attention could be dangerous. That night after they got back to the ranch, Ethan found Lena in the kitchen again. She was sitting very still, her hands folded on the table, staring at nothing. "You all right?" he asked. "Fine." "Lena, I didn't want them to know," she said suddenly. "About the medical training. I just wanted to cook and keep house and be left alone." He sat down across from her. "Why?" She was quiet for so long he thought she wouldn't answer. Then she said, "Because every time people find out what I can do, they take it away." "What do you mean?" "I had a position before this, in a town in Colorado. I was a housekeeper there too, but the family found out I had medical knowledge. They started asking me to help with their friends, their neighbors. Then someone complained to the authorities that I was practicing medicine without a license. I lost my position, had to leave town." Ethan felt cold. "That's why you came here. That's why I always come somewhere new. Every few years, every time someone finds out. But you saved Samuel's life today." "I know." She looked at him, and he saw fear in her eyes for the first time. "And now they all know what I can do, which means I'll probably have to leave again soon." "No." Ethan said the word coming out harder than he meant it to. "You're not going anywhere." "Ethan, I mean it. Whatever happens, we'll figure it out. You're not alone this time." She looked at him for a long moment. Then she nodded just once, and he saw her shoulders drop slightly, like she'd been carrying something heavy and had finally set it down. "Thank you," she whispered. They sat there in the lamplight, not talking, just being. And Ethan realized something that should have terrified him, but somehow didn't. He needed her. Not just for the cooking or the cleaning, or the way she saw things he couldn't see. He needed her because she made him remember what it felt like to care about something other than just surviving. The trouble started 3 days later. Ethan was in the barn when Marcus came running in, his face flushed. "Boss," he said, breathing hard, "there's a man here to see you. Says he's from the county medical board." Ethan's blood went cold. "Where?" "Front porch." He found the man standing there tall and thin, holding a leather case. He had the look of someone who enjoyed delivering bad news. "Mr. Cole," the man said, "I'm Inspector Harrison. I'm here to investigate reports of unlicensed medical practice on your property." "There's no medical practice here," Ethan said carefully. "That's not what I've heard. I've been told you employ a woman who treated a patient in town without proper credentials. She helped a man who was dying. She didn't charge him anything. She probably saved his life." "That may be," Harrison said, pulling out a notebook, "but the law is very clear. Only licensed physicians may practice medicine in this territory. If I find evidence that this woman, Miss Hart, has been treating patients, I'll have no choice but to issue a citation, possibly press charges." "Charges," Ethan's voice rose. "For saving a man's life. For breaking the law." Harrison's voice was flat, bureaucratic. "I'll need to speak with Miss Hart. Is she here?" Before Ethan could answer, Lena appeared in the doorway. She must have been listening. "I'm here," she said. Harrison looked her up and down, his expression dismissive. "Miss Hart, I have some questions for you." "I'm sure you do." For the next 15 minutes, Ethan watched Harrison grill her about her training, her experience, what exactly she'd done for Samuel Porter. Lena answered every question calmly, precisely giving him nothing he could use against her. Finally, Harrison closed his notebook. "Miss Hart," he said, "I'm going to be very clear with you. You are not a licensed physician. You are not authorized to practice medicine in this territory. If I hear of you treating anyone else for any reason, I will have you arrested. Do you understand?" "I understand," Lena said quietly. "Good." He turned to Ethan. "Mr. Cole, I suggest you reconsider employing this woman. Her presence here could cause you considerable legal trouble." Then he left, climbing into his buggy and driving away without looking back. Ethan turned to Lena. Her face was pale but calm. "You don't have to worry," she said. "I won't cause you trouble. I'll pack my things." "No." The word came out like a gunshot. "You're not leaving." "Ethan, he just said—" "I don't care what he said. You're staying." He took a breath, trying to calm down. "We'll figure this out, but you're not running again. Not this time." She looked at him with something in her eyes he couldn't quite read. Hope, maybe. Or fear. Or both. "Okay," she finally said. "Okay." But as Ethan watched her walk back into the house, he couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning. That whoever had sent Harrison wasn't done yet. And he was right. Because that night, when he finally opened the letter that had been sitting on his desk for 3 days, he found out exactly how much trouble they were really in. The bank was calling in his loan. He had 60 days to pay $1,500, or he'd lose everything. Ethan stared at the number until the ink seemed to blur. $1,500. He didn't have 1,500 cents. He heard Lena's footsteps behind him but didn't turn around. "What is it?" she asked. He handed her the letter without speaking, watched her eyes move across the page. Her face didn't change, but her fingers tightened on the paper. 60 days, she said quietly. 60 days to come up with money I don't have. He laughed, but it came out bitter. They've been patient, the bank said. Patient. Like I've been sitting here doing nothing for 2 years. Lena set the letter down on the desk. How much do you have? 300, maybe. If I sell the last of the furniture Sarah's mother gave us. He rubbed his face. It's not enough. It'll never be enough. Then we make it enough. He looked at her then. She was standing very straight, her hands folded in front of her, but there was something in her eyes that hadn't been there before. Something hard. Lena, there's no... The cattle you have left, how much are they worth? Maybe 400 if I can get them to market. But I can't. Half of them are still sick, and I don't have the men to drive them. Then we heal them first. Then we find the men. You heard what that inspector said. If you treat anything else... He said people, Lena interrupted. He didn't say cattle. Ethan blinked. Then, despite everything, he felt something that might have been a smile trying to form. You're saying we should... I'm saying your cattle are sick and I know how to fix them, unless you'd rather lose the ranch arguing about legalities. He stared at her. 2 weeks ago, she'd been a stranger who couldn't get 3 words out. Now she was standing in his kitchen telling him how to save his life. All right, he said. All right. What do you need? They started before dawn. Lena went through the sick cattle one by one, checking eyes, listening to breathing, examining every symptom with a focus that made Ethan feel useless. She made a list of medicines she needed most, of which he'd never heard of, and sent him to town with exact instructions. The general store owner, Mr. Patterson, squinted at the list, like it was written in a foreign language. What's all this for? He asked. Cattle, Ethan said shortly. Your housekeeper know about veterinary medicine too. Apparently. Patterson handed over the supplies without further comment, but Ethan saw the look in his eyes. The whole town was watching now, wondering, waiting to see what the strange woman would do next. When he got back to the ranch, he found Lena in the pen with the sick animals talking to them in that quiet voice she used. The cattle had stopped fighting her. They stood still while she worked, like they understood she was trying to help. How do you do that? He asked. Do what? Get them to trust you so fast. She looked up from the calf she was treating. I don't lie to them. It was such a simple answer that Ethan didn't know what to say to it. By the end of the first week, 3 of the sick cattle were improving. By the end of the second, all but 1 had recovered. The one that didn't make it, Lena sat with until the end, her hand on its neck whispering something Ethan couldn't hear. I'm sorry, he said when it was over. Don't be. We saved the others. That's what matters. But he saw the way her shoulders sagged as she walked away, and he understood. She cared about everything she touched, even when she pretended not to. The ranch hands noticed the change too. Marcus pulled Ethan aside one morning, his expression serious. "Boss," he said, "I don't know what that woman's doing, but whatever it is, it's working. The cattle look better than they have in months. The fences are fixed. Even the chickens are laying more eggs. She's just doing her job. Her job was cooking. This is something else." Marcus paused. "The men are talking, saying maybe our luck's finally changing." Ethan wanted to believe that. But every time he looked at the calendar, he saw how many days they had left. 43, 42, 41. The number kept shrinking, and the money didn't appear. The break came from an unexpected direction. Ethan was in town again trying to negotiate with the feed supplier when he ran into Samuel Porter. The man looked better than he had since the incident, color back in his face moving without that careful slowness that came after a heart episode. "Mr. Cole," Samuel said, gripping his hand hard. "I've been meaning to come see you." "No need. How are you feeling?" "Good. Real good, thanks to Miss Hart." Samuel lowered his voice. "Listen, I heard about your situation. The bank. The loan." Ethan felt heat creep up his neck. "Word travels fast. It's a small town. And I wanted you to know some of us have been talking about what Miss Hart did for me, about what she's been doing for folks around here, even though that inspector told her not to." "She hasn't been treating anyone," Ethan said quickly. "She knows the rules." Samuel gave him a look that said he wasn't fooled. "My wife's sister had a baby last week. Difficult birth. Your Miss Hart happened to be visiting, just visiting mind you, and somehow the baby and the mother both made it through when the midwife said they wouldn't." Ethan's stomach dropped. Samuel. And old Tom Richards, he had a cough that was getting worse. Miss Hart made him some tea, just tea, nothing medical about it, and now he's breathing better than he has in years. If that inspector finds out. That's what I'm trying to tell you. We don't want him to find out. We want to help. Samuel pulled out an envelope. "There's $50 here. From the families Miss Hart's helped. They wanted to give it to her directly, but she won't take it. So we're giving it to you. For the ranch." Ethan stared at the envelope like it might bite him. "I can't." "Yes, you can. Because if you lose this ranch, Miss Hart leaves, and we need her here." Samuel pressed the money into his hand. "There'll be more. People are passing the word. But you have to promise me something." "What?" "You keep her safe. From that inspector. From whoever's trying to shut her down. Because I don't know where she came from or why she ended up here, but I know good when I see it. And that woman is good all the way through." When Ethan told Lena about the money that night, she went very still. "They shouldn't have done that," she said. "They wanted to. I didn't help them for money." "I know. That's why they gave it." He set the envelope on the table between them. "Lena, you've been helping people, haven't you? Even after Harrison warned you." She didn't answer right away, just looked at her hands folded in her lap. "I made a woman tea," she said finally. "I held a baby while her mother rested. I told a man to sleep with his head elevated. That's not practicing medicine. That's just being human. Harrison won't see it that way. I know. But you're doing it anyway." She looked up at him then, and he saw something fierce in her eyes. "Yes, because what's the point of knowing how to help people if you don't help them? What's the point of any of it if you just stand by and watch people suffer?" Ethan felt something shift in his chest. He'd been so focused on survival, on keeping the ranch, paying the bank, getting through each day, that he'd forgotten what it felt like to care about something bigger than himself. "You're going to get yourself arrested," he said quietly. "Maybe. And me with you, probably. I'll understand if you want me to leave." "I don't want you to leave." The words came out before he could stop them. "I haven't wanted you to leave for a while now." Lena looked at him for a long moment. Then she said very softly, "Good, Because I don't want to go get to Mitog. The money from the families helped, but it wasn't enough. Ethan sold what furniture he could bear to part with. Lena sold the few pieces of jewelry she'd brought with her, a watch, a brooch. Things she said didn't matter. They pooled everything together and counted it 3 times, hoping the number would change. $900. Still $600 short. We could sell more cattle, Lena suggested. Not enough time to get them to market and back. And if I sell now, I won't have enough breeding stock left to rebuild. Then we need another option. Ethan was about to answer when Marcus burst into the kitchen, his face pale. Boss, he said, you need to come outside, now. In the yard stood a man Ethan had never wanted to see on his property. Victor Kane. Tall, well-dressed, sitting on a horse that probably cost more than Ethan's entire herd. Behind him were 3 men who looked like they'd been hired for their ability to intimidate. Mr. Cole, Kane said, tipping his hat like they were old friends. I hope I'm not intruding. What do you want, Kane? Kane smiled. It didn't reach his eyes. I heard about your financial difficulties. Terrible thing banks calling in loans. No loyalty anymore. If you came here to gloat... Actually, I came to make you an offer. Kane leaned forward in his saddle. I'll buy your ranch. Give you $1,800 for it. That's more than enough to pay off the bank and leave town with something in your pocket. Ethan felt ice in his veins. This ranch isn't for sale. Everything's for sale, Mr. Cole. It's just a matter of price. Kane's eyes flicked past Ethan to where Lena stood in the doorway. Besides, from what I hear, you've got other concerns now. Legal troubles. That inspector who came by. Must be stressful wondering when the law is going to come down on your housekeeper. Get off my land, Ethan said, his voice low. I'm trying to help you. No, you're trying to steal from me. Same as you've been doing for 2 years. Something flickered across Kane's face. Careful, Mr. Cole. That sounds like an accusation. It's the truth. You've been buying up land around here for years, and every ranch you've bought came from someone who suddenly couldn't pay their debts. Funny how that works. Kane's smile went cold. Luck of the market. Some men know how to manage money, others don't. He straightened in his saddle. My offer stands until the end of the month. After that, the bank will foreclose, and I'll buy the land from them for half what I'm offering you now. Your choice. He turned his horse and rode away, his men following. But before they reached the road, he called back, Oh, and Mr. Cole, I'd be very careful about who you associate with. Harboring someone who breaks the law, even a woman, can have serious consequences. When they were gone, Ethan turned to find Lena standing very still, her face pale. He knows, she said. Knows what? About me, about what I'm doing. That's why the inspector came. Kane sent him. Ethan felt the pieces clicking together. He's trying to run us off the land. Not us. You. I'm just the excuse. Lena's voice was shaking now, and he realized it wasn't fear. It was anger. He's using me to pressure you into selling. Then we don't sell. Ethan, if he has that kind of power, if he can send inspectors, influence the bank. I don't care. He meant it. This is my land, my home, and I'm not giving it to him just because he's got money and connections, even if it means losing everything. I've already lost everything that mattered, he said quietly. The ranch is all I have left, and I'm not losing it without a fight. Lena looked at him for a long moment. Then she nodded. Then we fight. That night they made a plan. It wasn't a good plan, they both knew that, but it was all they had. They would get the cattle to market no matter what it took. Sell them for the best price they could get. Use every penny to pay down the loan, then beg the bank for more time to come up with the rest. It might not work, Ethan said. It's better than giving up. Kane's not going to make this easy. I know. They sat in silence for a while. Then Lena said, Can I ask you something? Anything. Why does he want your land so badly? There are other ranches around here, bigger ones. Ethan had been wondering the same thing. My land borders the creek, only year-round water source for miles. Whoever controls it controls everything downstream. So if he gets your ranch, He can charge every other rancher for water access, or refuse to give it at all. Force them to sell to him too. Ethan felt sick saying it out loud. He's not just after my land, he's after all of it, and I'm the last one standing in his way. Lena was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "We're going to need help." "I know. But who's going to help us against Victor Kane? He owns half the town, the bank, probably the sheriff too." "Not the people," Lena said softly. "The people he hasn't bought yet." She was right. Over the next week, something remarkable happened. People started showing up at the ranch. Samuel Porter came with his sons offering to help drive the cattle to market. The woman whose sister Lena had helped with the birth arrived with her husband bringing food and supplies. Old Tom Richards appeared with 3 of his nephews, all of them ready to work. "We heard you might need some hands," Samuel said like it was the most natural thing in the world. Ethan didn't know what to say. These were people who had their own ranches, their own problems. But they were here anyway. "Kane's not going to like this," he finally managed. "Probably not," Samuel agreed. "But we're not doing this for Kane. We're doing it because it's right." They organized the drive for 2 weeks out. It would take 4 days to get to Cheyenne, 4 days back. That would leave them just enough time to get the money to the bank before the deadline, if everything went perfectly, which of course it didn't. 3 days before they were supposed to leave, Marcus found Ethan in the barn. "We've got a problem," he said. "What now?" "The cattle. Someone cut the fence on the north pasture last night. Half the herd scattered." Ethan felt his blood go cold. "How many?" "At least 15 head, maybe more. It's hard to tell in the dark." They spent the entire day rounding up the cattle. Found most of them, but 3 were missing, probably driven off by whoever cut the fence. When they finally got back to the ranch, exhausted and furious, they found Lena waiting with news that made everything worse. "The bank sent another letter," she said, handing it to him. Ethan read it twice, hoping he'd misunderstood. But the words didn't change. Due to concerns about the borrower's ability to repay the bank was accelerating the deadline. They now had 2 weeks instead of 60 days. "They can't do this," he said. "Apparently they can." Kane. Ethan crumpled the letter in his fist. "He convinced them to move up the deadline. Probably told them I was planning to skip town or something." "Can we still make it?" He did the math in his head. If they left tomorrow instead of 3 days from now, if they pushed hard, if they didn't run into any problems. "Maybe," he said, "but we'd have to leave at first light, and we'd need every animal we have left." "Then that's what we do." They worked through the night preparing for the drive. Lena packed supplies, organized equipment, made sure every detail was covered. The volunteers showed up before dawn, ready to move. But as the sun came up and they started moving the herd out, Ethan saw something that made his stomach turn. Victor Kane was sitting on his horse at the edge of the property watching them, just watching with that cold smile on his face. "Keep moving," Ethan told the others. "Don't stop." They drove the cattle past Kane without incident, but Ethan knew this wasn't over. Kane had something planned. He could feel it. They made good time the first day, covering almost 15 miles. The second day was harder. 2 of the cattle went lame, and they had to leave them behind. By the third day, they were exhausted, running on coffee and determination. They were less than a day from Cheyenne when the real trouble hit. A group of men blocked the road ahead. 6 of them, all armed, all wearing the same expression of practiced menace. "Road's closed," their leader said. Ethan recognized him. One of Kane's men. "This is a public road," Samuel said. "Not anymore. Private property now. You'll have to go around." Around meant adding 2 days to the journey. 2 days they didn't have. "We're going through," Ethan said. The leader's hand moved to his gun. "I don't think so." For a moment, nobody moved. Ethan could feel the tension like a physical thing, could see his volunteers shifting nervously, could hear Lena's sharp intake of breath behind him. Then, from behind the line of Kane's men, a voice called out, "Let them through." Everyone turned. The sheriff was riding up, and he didn't look happy. but he was here, and he was alone, which meant he wasn't on Kane's payroll. Not completely, anyway. "This is a public road," the sheriff said, looking at Kane's men. "You're blocking commerce. That's illegal." Mr. Kane said, "I don't care what Mr. Kane said. Move." The men hesitated, then slowly rode aside. Ethan met the sheriff's eyes as they passed. The man gave him the smallest nod. "Get your cattle to market, Cole," he said quietly, "while you still can." Right. They reached Cheyenne that evening, sold the cattle the next morning. The buyer drove a hard bargain he'd heard about Ethan's desperation. Of course, everyone had, but in the end, they got enough. $1,300. Combined with what they already had, it was just barely enough to satisfy the bank. Ethan held the money in his hands, hardly believing it. They'd done it. Against everything, they'd actually done it. "We should get back," Samuel said, "before Kane finds another way to stop us." They rode through the night, switching horses at a relay station, pushing themselves past exhaustion. Ethan kept the money in his coat, checking it every few miles to make sure it was still there. They reached town just as the bank was opening. Ethan walked in, set the money on the counter, and said, "I'm here to settle my account." The banker, Mr. Whitmore, a thin man who'd always looked at Ethan with pity, stared at the money like he'd seen a ghost. "Mr. Cole, we weren't expecting $1,500. That's what the letter said. Count it." Whitmore counted it, twice. Then he looked up and Ethan saw something unexpected in his face. Relief. "Mr. Cole," he said quietly, "I need to tell you something. This loan, the acceleration, it wasn't the bank's decision. We were pressured. Mr. Kane made certain representations, threatened to move his accounts if we didn't." "I know." Ethan cut him off. "Just tell me if this is enough." Whitmore looked at the money, then back at Ethan. "It's enough. Your account is settled." Ethan felt his knees go weak. They'd done it. The ranch was saved. For now. When he got back to the ranch, Lena was waiting on the porch. She didn't ask, just looked at his face and knew. "We did it," he said. She closed her eyes and he saw her shoulders drop, like she'd been holding her breath for days. Maybe she had been. "Thank you," she said. "For what? For not giving up, for fighting." "I should be thanking you. If you hadn't—" He stopped, overwhelmed by everything she'd done, everything she was. "Lena, I don't know how to—" She put her hand over his just for a moment. "You don't have to say it." But he wanted to. He wanted to tell her that she'd saved more than his ranch, that she'd reminded him what it meant to live instead of just survive, that somewhere in the past few weeks she'd become the most important person in his world. Instead, he just held her hand and hoped she understood. Behind them, the sun was setting over land that was still his. For the first time in 2 years, Ethan Cole allowed himself to hope. But hope was dangerous, because neither of them knew that Victor Kane's real move was just beginning, and that the worst was still ahead. The peace lasted exactly 3 days. Ethan was in the barn when he heard horses approaching. Too many horses. He stepped outside and counted 8 men, all wearing deputy badges, led by Inspector Harrison, and a man he didn't recognize, older, gray-haired, carrying himself like someone used to being obeyed. "Mr. Cole," Harrison said, not bothering to dismount. "This is Territorial Marshal Brennan. He has some questions for Miss Hart." Ethan's blood went cold. "About what?" Marshal Brennan spoke for the first time, his voice flat and official. "About unauthorized medical practice. About treating patients without a license. About violating direct orders from a county inspector." He pulled out a paper. "I have a warrant for her arrest." Arrest. Ethan felt the word like a punch. For helping people. For breaking the law. Brennan's face showed nothing. "Is she here?" Before Ethan could answer, Lena appeared in the doorway. She must have heard the horses. Her face was calm, but Ethan saw the way her hands gripped the doorframe. "I'm here," she said. "Lena Hart, you're under arrest for—" "I know what I'm being arrested for," she interrupted quietly. May I get my coat? Brennan nodded. Two deputies moved to follow her inside like she might run. Ethan wanted to laugh at that. Lena never ran from anything. When she came back out, Ethan stepped between her and the marshal. How much is bail? He demanded. There's no bail, Harrison said, and Ethan heard satisfaction in his voice. Judge Parker's orders. Miss Hart is to be held pending trial. You can't. We can and we are. Brennan gestured to his deputies. Take her to town, the holding cell at the sheriff's office. Wait! Lena's voice cut through everything. She looked at Ethan, and he saw something in her eyes that terrified him. Acceptance. Like she'd been expecting this all along. Don't fight them. It'll only make things worse. Lena. Please. She put her hand on his arm just for a second. Take care of the ranch. That's what matters. Then the deputies led her away, and Ethan stood there watching, feeling more helpless than he'd felt since the day Sarah died. Marcus came up beside him. What do we do, boss? We get her out, Ethan said. Whatever it takes. He rode into town an hour later and went straight to the sheriff's office. The sheriff, Tom Michaels, a man who'd never been brave but had at least been fair, looked uncomfortable when Ethan walked in. She's in the back, Michaels said before Ethan could ask. You can't see her yet. Marshal's orders. When can I see her? Tomorrow, after she's been formally charged. Tom, you know this is wrong. You know Lena hasn't hurt anyone. The sheriff looked away. It's not my call, Ethan. The marshal has jurisdiction. My hands are tied. Kane did this. He's behind all of it. I don't know anything about that. Don't you? Ethan leaned across the desk. Don't lie to me, Tom. How much did he pay you to look the other way? Michael's face flushed. Get out of my office. Not until I see her. I said get out or I'll arrest you too. They stared at each other for a long moment. Then Ethan turned and walked out, slamming the door hard enough to rattle the windows. Outside, he found half the town gathered in the street, talking in tight clusters. He caught fragments of conversation as he passed. Heard she was pretending to be a doctor. No telling what else she's been lying about. Always knew there was something strange about her. Ethan wanted to scream at all of them. These were the same people who'd taken Lena's help, who'd brought her money, who'd thanked her with tears in their eyes. Now they were turning on her because it was easier than standing up to Victor Kane. Then he saw Martha Henderson, holding court near the church, her voice carrying clearly. I always said there was something improper about that arrangement, she was saying to a group of women. A single woman living alone with a man, calling herself a housekeeper. We all know what that really means. Something snapped inside Ethan. He crossed the street in 4 strides. Say that again. He said, his voice low and dangerous. Martha's eyes widened. Mr. Cole, I was simply... You were spreading lies about a good woman who's done nothing but help people, including you, if I remember right. Didn't Lena help your daughter when she had that fever last month? Martha's face went red. That's completely different. No, it's not. You're just a coward. He looked at the women around her. All of you. You take her help when you need it, then stab her in the back the second it becomes inconvenient. You make me sick. He walked away before anyone could respond, his hands shaking with rage. That night, Samuel Porter showed up at the ranch with news that made everything worse. I talked to my cousin who works at the courthouse, Samuel said, his face grim. The trial's set for 2 weeks from now. Judge Parker's presiding. Parker. Ethan felt his stomach drop. He's in Kane's pocket. Completely. And the charges are serious, Ethan. Unauthorized practice of medicine. Fraud. Reckless endangerment. If they make them stick, Lena could go to prison for 5 years. 5 years. Ethan couldn't breathe around those words. There has to be something we can do, he said. There is. You need to hire a lawyer, a good one. With what money I just spent everything I had paying off the bank. Samuel pulled out an envelope. There's $200 here. From the families Lena helped. They wanted her to have it for her defense. Ethan took the money with hands that shook. It won't be enough. A good lawyer will cost 5 times this. Then we raise more. We pass the word. We... It won't matter. The voice came from the doorway. Ethan turned to find Thomas standing there, his young face twisted with guilt. I'm sorry, boss. I'm so sorry. What did you do? Kane's men came to see me today. They said if I testified against Miss Lena, if I said she'd been treating people for money running an illegal practice, they'd pay me $100. Thomas was crying now. I told them no. I swear I told them no. But they said they already had 3 other witnesses lined up, that she was going to prison whether I helped or not. Who? Ethan demanded. Who agreed to testify? I don't know. They wouldn't say. But boss, they made it sound like they had everything they needed, like the trial's just a formality. After Thomas left, Ethan sat alone in the dark, trying to think. But every path he followed led to the same dead end. Kane had the law, the money, the power. What did Ethan have? A ranch that was barely surviving and $200 that wouldn't buy justice. He thought about Lena, in that cell alone, probably awake, like he was knowing what was coming. And he felt something shift inside him. He'd spent 2 years letting life happen to him. Letting grief make his decisions. Letting fear keep him small. Not anymore. The next morning, Ethan rode to every ranch within 20 miles. He talked to everyone who'd ever taken Lena's help. Everyone who owed her their health, or their children's lives, or just a moment of kindness when they'd needed it most. By evening, he had commitments for $800. Still not enough for the kind of lawyer who could stand up to Kane's legal machine, but it was a start. The problem was time. The trial was in less than 2 weeks, and finding a lawyer, bringing them to Wyoming, preparing a defense, it all took time they didn't have. He was riding back to the ranch exhausted and running out of ideas when he passed the old church on the edge of town. Through the window, he saw people gathering. A lot of people. He tied his horse and went inside. The church was packed. Must have been 50 people there, maybe more. And at the front, speaking to them all, was Samuel Porter. Doesn't matter what Judge Parker says, Samuel was saying. We know the truth. We know what Lena Hart is, and we're not going to let them destroy her for the crime of being decent. Ethan stood in the back watching. One by one, people stood up and told their stories. The mother whose baby Lena had saved. The old man who could breathe again. The farmer whose infected hand Lena had treated when gangrene would have taken it. Then Sarah Porter stood, Samuel's wife, her voice shaking but determined. My husband died 3 months ago, she said. That's what the doctor told us. He had a heart attack and there was nothing to be done. But Lena Hart didn't accept that. She fought for him. She saved him. And now Kane wants to put her in prison for it. Her voice broke. We can't let that happen. We can't. The church erupted in agreement. People were standing, shouting, some crying. Ethan felt something crack open in his chest. What do you need us to do? Someone called out. Samuel looked around the room. We show up, all of us. We pack that courthouse. We make sure Judge Parker knows that we're watching, that we won't accept a rigged verdict. And if he gives one anyway? Another voice asked. Samuel was quiet for a moment. Then he said, Then we make sure everyone knows what kind of justice Wyoming offers. We write to the territorial governor. We write to the newspapers in Cheyenne and Denver. We make enough noise that they can't ignore us. It wasn't much of a plan, but it was something. And for the first time since they'd taken Lena away, Ethan felt like he could breathe. The next day, the sheriff finally let him see Lena. She looked smaller in the cell, but her eyes were clear and her voice was steady when she spoke. You shouldn't have come, she said. Where else would I be? Taking care of the ranch, that's what matters. The ranch can wait. You can't. He gripped the bars between them. Lena, we're going to fight this. Samuel's organizing the town. We're raising money for a lawyer. Ethan, stop. She put her hand over his, the bars cold between them. You need to let me go. What? Kane wants you to spend everything fighting for me. He wants you to exhaust yourself, bankrupt yourself until you have nothing left, and you have to sell to him anyway. Don't give him what he wants. I'm not giving up on you. I'm not asking you to give up. I'm asking you to be smart." Her voice was gentle but firm. "The ranch is what matters. The land, the water. If Cain gets that, he wins everything. But if you hold on to it, if you keep fighting, I can't lose you too." Ethan said the words coming out raw. "I can't." Lena's expression softened. "You're not losing me. I'm right here. And whatever happens at that trial, that doesn't change what we built. What we did. We saved the ranch, Ethan, together. Nobody can take that away." 5 years, he said. "If they convict you, that's 5 years. I'll be alive. I'll be fine. I've survived worse than a prison cell." He wanted to ask what she meant by that. What could possibly be worse? But the sheriff was calling time. "I'll be back tomorrow," Ethan said. "Don't. Use that time to take care of the ranch, to take care of yourself." She squeezed his hand once more. "Promise me." "I can't promise that." She almost smiled. "Then just don't do anything stupid." "Too late for that. I hired you, didn't I?" This time she did smile, small and real. "Yes, you did." The lawyer arrived 5 days before the trial. His name was Daniel Wright, and he'd come all the way from Denver on the promise of the money they'd raised. He was younger than Ethan had hoped, maybe 30, with sharp eyes and an intensity that made him talk fast. "I've reviewed the charges," Wright said, spreading papers across Ethan's kitchen table. "They're charging her with 3 counts of unauthorized medical practice, 2 counts of fraud, and 1 count of reckless endangerment. The prosecution will argue that she presented herself as a qualified physician and endangered lives through incompetent treatment." "She didn't present herself as anything," Ethan said. "She just helped people. I believe you. But belief and proof are different things. Do you have any witnesses who can testify that she never claimed to be a doctor? Everyone she helped, 50 people, maybe more. And how many of those people will actually testify against Victor Cain?" Ethan didn't have an answer for that. Wright leaned back. "Here's the truth, Mr. Cole. This trial is political. Cain wants your land and he's using Miss Hart to get it. Judge Parker will do what Cain tells him to do. The only way we win is if we make it so publicly embarrassing for them to convict that they have to back down. How do we do that? We make Lena Hart a hero. We show the jury, and more importantly the people watching, that she saved lives, that she's everything Cain and his bought judge are not." Wright's eyes gleamed. "We turn this trial into a referendum on Victor Cain himself." It was risky. It was probably stupid, but it was the only chance they had. "All right," Ethan said. "What do you need from me?" The trial started on a Monday morning. The courthouse was packed, standing room only, people pressed shoulder to shoulder. Ethan saw Samuel and his wife in the front row. Saw the families Lena had helped scattered throughout the crowd. Saw Martha Henderson sitting primly near the back, her face carefully neutral. And he saw Victor Cain sitting beside the prosecutor, watching everything with those cold, calculating eyes. Lena was brought in, wearing a plain gray dress, her hair pulled back, her hands in front of her. She looked at Ethan once, just once, and he saw her mouth form a single word. "Don't. Don't worry. Don't fight. Don't sacrifice everything for her." He ignored all of it. Judge Parker banged his gavel and the trial began. The prosecutor went first, laying out a case built on technicalities and fear. He called Harrison, who testified that he'd explicitly warned Lena to stop practicing medicine. He called a doctor from Cheyenne who'd never met Lena, but who testified that unauthorized medical treatment was dangerous and illegal. Then he called his surprise witness. Ethan's stomach turned when he saw who it was. Mrs. Patterson, the general store owner's wife. She took the stand with her head down, not looking at anyone. "Mrs. Patterson," the prosecutor said smoothly, "did Miss Hart ever treat you or your family?" "Yes, my son. He had a cough." "Did she charge you for this treatment?" A pause. Then quietly, "Yes." Ethan heard the murmur run through the courtroom. Lena's face went white. "How much did she charge?" $2. It was a lie. It had to be a lie. but Mrs. Patterson was saying it under oath in front of a judge, and the damage was done. Wright cross-examined hard, trying to shake her story, but she stuck to it. Ethan saw Kane lean back in his chair satisfied. When court adjourned for the day, Ethan cornered Mr. Patterson outside. "Your wife just lied under oath," he said. Patterson wouldn't meet his eyes. "She told the truth as she remembers it." "Kane paid you." "How much?" "I don't know what you're talking about." "How much?" Ethan grabbed his arm. "How much did it cost to buy your soul?" Patterson yanked free. "You don't understand. Kane owns the building my store's in. He said if we didn't cooperate, he'd triple the rent. We'd lose everything. So you sold out Lena instead." "I'm sorry." Patterson's voice cracked. "I'm sorry, but I have a family. I have to protect them." He walked away, and Ethan stood there understanding for the first time just how deep Kane's power ran. He didn't just have money, he had leverage over everyone. Fear was his real currency. The prosecution rested after 2 days. They'd called 6 witnesses, all telling variations of the same story. Lena had practiced medicine without authorization, endangered patients charged money for her services. Half of it was lies. But under oath from frightened people protecting their own interests, the lies sounded like truth. Now it was Wright's turn. He called Samuel Porter first. Samuel told the story of his heart attack, of how Lena had saved his life when he would have died in the street. "Did she ever claim to be a doctor?" Wright asked. "No, she said she had some medical knowledge. That was all." "Did she charge you?" "Not a penny. In fact, when we tried to give her money later, she refused it." The prosecutor objected, calling it hearsay. Judge Parker sustained. Wright moved on. He called the woman whose sister's baby Lena had helped deliver. Called the farmer with the infected hand. Called witness after witness, each one telling the same story. Lena had helped them when no one else would. Never claimed credentials she didn't have. Never asked for payment. The courtroom was riveted. People were crying. Even Judge Parker looked uncomfortable. Then Wright called his final witness, Ethan Cole. Ethan took the stand, his mouth dry, his heart pounding. Wright walked him through the story, how Lena had arrived, what she'd done on the ranch, how she'd helped the community. "Mr. Cole," Wright said, "in all the time Miss Hart has worked for you, has she ever misrepresented herself?" "Never. She's the most honest person I know." "Has she ever endangered anyone through her actions?" "The opposite. She saved lives, mine included." "How did she save your life?" Ethan took a breath. "She reminded me that life was worth living, that there was still good in the world, that one person choosing to help others could make a difference." His voice caught. "She saved my ranch, but more than that, she saved me." The courtroom was silent. Even Kane looked uncomfortable. Then the prosecutor stood for cross-examination, and Ethan knew this was where things would get ugly. "Mr. Cole," the prosecutor said, "you have feelings for Miss Hart, don't you?" "Objection," Wright said. "Goes to bias, Your Honor." "I'll allow it," Parker said. Ethan looked the prosecutor in the eye. "Yes, I care about her." "So your testimony here today is influenced by those feelings. You'd say anything to protect her." "I'd tell the truth to protect her, which is what I'm doing." "Is it true that you're deeply in debt, Mr. Cole?" Ethan felt the ground shift. "I paid my debts. Only recently, and only with help from the community help organized by Miss Hart." "Isn't it true that without her you would have lost everything?" "Yes." "So you owe her, quite literally." "I owe her my life, but that doesn't change the facts." The prosecutor smiled. No further questions. Closing arguments came the next day. The prosecutor painted Lena as a con artist who'd manipulated a grieving widower and a gullible community. Wright painted her as a hero who'd been persecuted for the crime of compassion. Then Judge Parker sent the jury out to deliberate. They came back in less than an hour. Ethan's heart sank. Quick verdicts were never good verdicts. The foreman stood a middle-aged man Ethan didn't recognize. Parker asked for the verdict. On the charge of unauthorized medical practice, we find the defendant guilty. Ethan heard Lena draw in a breath, felt his world start to collapse. On the charge of fraud, we find the defendant guilty. People in the courtroom were crying. Someone behind Ethan swore. On the charge of reckless endangerment, we find the defendant not guilty. Small mercy, but not enough. Parker banged his gavel. Sentencing will be held tomorrow morning. Miss Hart is remanded to custody. As the deputies led Lena away, she looked back at Ethan, and she smiled. Actually smiled. Like she was trying to tell him it would be all right. But Ethan knew better. Tomorrow, Judge Parker would sentence her to 5 years in prison, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. He'd lost. Kane had won. Unless he could find a way to change the game entirely. That night, Ethan couldn't sleep. He paced the ranch house, his mind racing through 100 useless plans. Break Lena out of jail. Confront Kane directly. Leave Wyoming entirely and start over somewhere else. All of them ended the same way. With nothing. He was still pacing when he heard horses at 2 in the morning. He grabbed his rifle and went to the door expecting trouble. Instead, he found Samuel Porter and a dozen other men standing in his yard. "We need to talk," Samuel said. They gathered in Ethan's kitchen, faces grim in the lamplight. Ethan recognized most of them ranchers, farmers' men who'd been at the trial. "Tomorrow morning, Parker's going to sentence Lena," Samuel said. 5 years, maybe more if Kane pushes him. "I know. We can't let that happen." Ethan set down his coffee cup. "What are you suggesting?" "We break her out," said Jack Morrison, a young rancher with more courage than sense. "Storm the jail tonight. Get her on a horse and out of the territory before anyone knows she's gone." "That's insane," Ethan said. "They'd hunt her down. Hunt all of us down." "So what do we do?" Jack demanded. "Just let them lock her up." "There has to be another way." "There isn't," Samuel said quietly. "We've tried legal. We've tried public pressure. Kane owns the judge, the marshal, half the town. The system isn't going to save her." Ethan looked around the table. Saw desperate men willing to throw away their own futures to help someone who'd shown them kindness. And he realized something. This was exactly what Kane wanted. For them to act rashly, to break the law, to give him an excuse to destroy them all. "No," Ethan said. "No." Jack stood up. "You're just going to abandon her." "I'm not abandoning her. I'm refusing to play Kane's game." Ethan stood too, meeting Jack's eyes. "If we break Lena out, we're criminals. Kane becomes the victim. He gets everything he wants, our land, our reputations, our freedom, all of it." "Then what do you suggest?" Samuel asked. Ethan was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "We change who we're fighting." "What does that mean?" "Kane has power because people are afraid of him, afraid of losing their businesses, their homes, their livelihoods. He uses that fear to control everyone." Ethan looked around the table. But what if people stopped being afraid? What if they saw that standing together was stronger than standing alone? "People won't risk it," Jack said. "You saw the trial. Half the witnesses lied because they were scared. Then we give them something to believe in, something bigger than fear." Ethan grabbed paper and a pencil. "Samuel, how many families did Lena help? Really help? 40, maybe 50. And how many of those would stand up for her if they knew others were doing the same?" Samuel's eyes widened. "You want to organize them. I want to show Judge Parker and Victor Kane that they're not just sentencing one woman tomorrow. They're sentencing everyone she helped, everyone who cares about her, and we're all going to be there watching." "We tried that at the trial," someone said. "Didn't work. Because we asked them to testify, to put themselves at risk legally. This is different. I'm not asking anyone to break the law. I'm just asking them to show up, to fill that courthouse so full that Parker has to see exactly who he's hurting." "And then what?" Jack asked. "He still has the power to sentence her." "Maybe, but he has to run for election next year, And if 50 families are watching him send a hero to prison because Victor Kane told him to, how do you think that election goes? The men around the table looked at each other. Ethan saw understanding start to dawn. It's a risk, Samuel said slowly. But it's a better risk than jailbreaking. It's more than a risk, Ethan said. It's a message that we're done being afraid, that Kane can buy judges and marshals, but he can't buy all of us. Samuel stood up. I'll start spreading the word, but Ethan, this only works if we get enough people. If it's just us, Kane wins anyway. Then we'd better get enough people to peg. By sunrise, Ethan had been to every house within 10 miles. By noon, word had spread through the county. By evening, people were arriving from as far as 30 miles away, camping in town, filling the streets. Ethan found Wright at the hotel, looking exhausted. I'm filing an appeal, Wright said. It won't stop the sentencing, but it might delay the prison transfer. Give us time to... How long can you delay it? A few days. Maybe a week if we're lucky. Make it as long as you can. Wright studied him. You have a plan. I have hope. That's different. Hope doesn't win trials, Mr. Cole. No, but it might win what comes after, Nached. The courthouse the next morning was beyond capacity. People lined the walls, sat on the floor, stood in the hallways. The crowd spilled out into the street. Men, women, children. Families Lena had helped. Families who'd heard about what she'd done. People who'd never met her but who understood that this trial was about more than one woman's freedom. It was about whether decency still mattered. Judge Parker looked physically ill when he saw the crowd. He banged his gavel, calling for order, but the whispers continued. Lena was brought in. When she saw all the people, her composure finally cracked. Ethan saw tears in her eyes. Order, Parker said again, his voice shaking slightly. I will have order in this court. The room quieted. Parker shuffled his papers, not meeting anyone's gaze. Miss Hart, you have been found guilty of unauthorized medical practice and fraud. Before I pass sentence, do you have anything to say? Lena stood. For a moment, she just looked at all the people who'd come. Then she spoke, her voice quiet but clear. I don't regret anything I did. If helping people is a crime, then I'm guilty. But I want everyone here to know that I never asked for anything in return. I never claimed to be something I wasn't. I just saw people suffering and tried to help. If that's wrong, then I don't understand what's right anymore. Parker cleared his throat. The law is clear, Miss Hart, regardless of your intentions. The doors at the back of the courtroom burst open. Everyone turned. A woman stood there breathing hard like she'd been running. Ethan recognized her, Mrs. Patterson, the store owner's wife who'd testified against Lena. Stop, she gasped. Please, Your Honor, stop. Mrs. Patterson, the prosecutor said, standing quickly. This is highly irregular. I lied, she said, her voice breaking. I lied under oath. Miss Hart never charged me anything, never charged anyone. Mr. Kane's man paid me to say she did, gave me $50 and said if I didn't testify the way he wanted, we'd lose our store. The courtroom erupted. Parker banged his gavel frantically. Order, I will have order. But Mrs. Patterson kept talking, her words tumbling out like she couldn't hold them back anymore. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry, Miss Hart. What I did was wrong. But I can't live with it anymore. I can't let you go to prison for lies I told. Victor Kane stood up, his face dark with rage. Your Honor, this woman is clearly disturbed. I'm not disturbed. I'm guilty. Mrs. Patterson looked at him directly. And so are you, Mr. Kane. You paid me. You paid the others. You rigged this whole trial because you want Mr. Cole's land, and you'll destroy anyone who gets in your way. That's slander, Kane said. It's the truth. Then another voice called out from the crowd. She's right. Everyone turned. A man stood up, one of the other witnesses who'd testified against Lena. Kane paid me too, he said. $100 to say Miss Hart had endangered my mother with her treatment. But the truth is, she saved my mother's life. Then another person stood, and another. One by one, the prosecution's witnesses recanted, confessing that Kane had bought their testimony. Parker's face had gone white. This is unprecedented. It's perjury, Your Honor, Wright said, standing smoothly. Multiple counts, which invalidates the entire trial. I move for immediate dismissal of all charges. Denied, Parker said quickly. The verdict stands. Based on false testimony, Wright's voice rang out. Your Honor, if you proceed with sentencing now, knowing these witnesses lied under oath, you're no longer enforcing the law. You're participating in a conspiracy. The words hung in the air. Every person in that courtroom was watching Parker, waiting to see what he would do. Ethan saw the moment the judge made his choice. Saw him look at Kane, then at the crowd, then back at his gavel. I'm declaring a mistrial, Parker said, his voice barely audible. All charges are dismissed. Miss Hart, you're free to go. The courtroom exploded with cheers. People were crying, embracing, shouting. Ethan pushed through the crowd to Lena, but Wright got there first, shaking her hand and saying something Ethan couldn't hear over the noise. When Ethan finally reached her, Lena was just standing there looking dazed. It's over, he said. She looked at him. Is it? He knew what she meant. Kane was still standing there, his face a mask of cold fury. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. But for now, for this moment, they'd won. Outside the courthouse, the celebration continued. People surrounded Lena, thanking her, apologizing for not standing up sooner. Mrs. Patterson was crying, begging forgiveness. Lena held her hands and told her it was all right, that she understood that courage came in different ways. Ethan stood back watching, feeling something loosen in his chest that had been tight for 2 years. Then he felt a presence beside him. Turned to find Victor Kane standing there, his expression unreadable. This isn't finished, Cole, Kane said quietly. I think it is. You embarrassed me in there. Cost me money. Reputation. You think I'm going to forget that? I think you're going to have a hard time buying this town now that everyone knows what you've been doing. Kane smiled, and it was like looking at a snake. You saved your housekeeper. Congratulations. But you still have a ranch to run, cattle to feed, debts to pay, and I have a very long memory. So do I, Ethan said. And so does everyone in that courthouse. You don't own us anymore, Kane. You never did. Kane stared at him for a long moment. Then he turned and walked away, his men following. But Ethan knew this was true, what Kane had said. It wasn't finished. Men like Kane didn't just give up and go away. They waited, planned, found new ways to hurt you. The difference was, Ethan wasn't alone anymore. That night back at the ranch, Ethan and Lena sat on the porch. Neither of them had said much since leaving town. There was too much to process, too many emotions tangled together. Finally, Lena spoke. Thank you, she said, for not giving up. I told you I wouldn't. You almost lost everything. The ranch, your savings, your reputation, all for me. Not for you, Ethan said. With you. There's a difference. She turned to look at him, and he saw something in her eyes he'd never seen before. Something vulnerable and hopeful and terrified all at once. When I came here, she said slowly, I thought I was just taking another position, another place to hide for a while before moving on. I never thought... She stopped, struggling with the words. I never thought I'd find a home. Is that what this is? Ethan asked. Home. I don't know. I've never had one before. Not really. My father died when I was 12. My mother when I was 16. I've been moving ever since, trying to find somewhere I fit. Somewhere I mattered. You matter here. Do I? He took her hand. It was the first time he'd done it, without some excuse, without pretending it was just comfort or support. Just him choosing to touch her because he wanted to. Yes, he said. You matter to me. More than I know how to say. She looked at their joined hands. I'm scared, she whispered. Of what? Of this. Of caring about someone again. Every time I let myself care, I lose them. Or they lose me. I don't know if I can survive that again. Then don't think about survival, Ethan said. Think about living. Real living, not just getting through each day. Think about what we could build here together. Your neighbors will talk. They're already talking. It could hurt you. Socially, financially. Lena. He turned her to face him. I don't care what they say. I care about you. And if that means dealing with gossip or judgment or whatever else comes, then so be it. I'm done living small. Done being afraid. She studied his face for a long moment. Then she said, Are you asking me to stay permanently? I'm asking you to consider it. No pressure. No expectations. Just think about it. What would I do? I can't practice medicine anymore. Not legally. You could do what you've been doing. Help people when they need it. Run the ranch with me. Or do something completely different. It doesn't matter, as long as you're here. Lena was quiet for a long time. Then she smiled, small and real. I'll think about it, she said. It wasn't a yes, but it wasn't a no either. And for now, that was enough. 3 days later, the first sign of retaliation came. Ethan was checking the fences when he found them. 20 head of cattle dead, poisoned from the look of it. Someone had put something in the water trough in the far pasture. He rode back to the house, his jaw clenched so tight it hurt. Cain, he said when he found Lena in the kitchen. You don't know that. Who else? This is what he does. Couldn't beat us legally, so now he's hitting where it hurts. What are we going to do? Report it to the sheriff. Not that it'll do any good, but at least it'll be on record. And then we rebuild. Again, same as always. But his voice was tired, and they both knew it. How many times could they rebuild before there was nothing left? That night, Ethan sat at his desk trying to calculate what the loss of 20 cattle meant. With winter coming, with feed prices rising, with someone knocked on the door. He opened it to find Samuel Porter standing there with 3 other ranchers. We heard what happened, Samuel said. About your cattle. Word travels fast. It's a small county, and we wanted you to know we're replacing them. Ethan blinked. What? Each of us is giving you 5 head. That's 20 cattle total. Should cover what you lost. I can't ask you to. You're not asking. We're offering. Samuel's voice was firm. Cain thinks he can isolate you, make you feel alone. So you'll give up and sell. But he's wrong. You stood up for Lena, stood up for all of us. Now we're standing up for you. Ethan felt his throat tighten. I don't know what to say. Say you'll accept the help. Say you'll keep fighting. I'll keep fighting, Ethan managed. And thank you, for all of it. After they left, Lena came and stood beside him. You asked people for help, she said softly. I didn't ask. They offered. You let them. That's the same thing. She was right. 2 months ago, he would have refused. Would have insisted on handling everything himself, pushing people away until he was alone again. But something had changed. Lena had changed him. Shown him that accepting help wasn't weakness. It was strength. Thank you, he said. For what? For teaching me that I don't have to do this alone. She smiled. You taught me the same thing. They stood there together looking out at the land they'd fought so hard to keep. It wasn't safe yet. Cain was still out there, still plotting. But for the first time in years, Ethan felt like they had a chance. Not just to survive, to win. The next morning brought another surprise. Ethan heard wagons in the yard and went outside to find a dozen families setting up camp. What's going on? He asked Samuel, who was directing people. Protection, Samuel said simply. Cain poisoned your cattle. Who knows what he'll try next? So we're staying, taking shifts, making sure nothing happens to your ranch or to Miss Lena. You can't just camp out here indefinitely. Watch us. Samuel grinned. Besides, some of the women want Lena to teach them about herbs and medicine, things they can do for their families without breaking any laws. And the men want to help with the winter preparations. Everybody wins. Ethan looked around at all the people who'd come, saw children playing, women cooking, men already working on repairs to his barn. I don't deserve this, he said quietly. Probably not. Samuel agreed cheerfully. But you're getting it anyway. That's what community means, Ethan. We take care of each other. Lena appeared beside him looking stunned. They're really staying. Looks like it. But why? Because you helped them when they needed it. Now they're returning the favor. She shook her head slowly, tears in her eyes. No one's ever... She couldn't finish the sentence. Ethan understood. She'd spent her whole life alone helping others, but never letting anyone help her back. Now she didn't have a choice. And from the look on her face, she was starting to realize that wasn't a bad thing. That evening, as the sun set over the ranch, Ethan found Lena sitting alone near the creek. He sat down beside her. "You all right?" he asked. "I'm overwhelmed," she admitted. "All these people here for us. It doesn't feel real." "It's real. You just have to let yourself believe it." She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "I've made a decision." His heart stopped. "About what?" "About staying. Permanently." She looked at him. "If the offer's still open..." "It's open," he said, trying to keep his voice steady. "It'll always be open." "Then I'm staying. Not just as your housekeeper, as your partner. In the ranch and fighting Cain and whatever comes next." She paused. "If that's what you want?" "That's what I want," he said. "More than anything." She smiled, and it was like the sun coming out. "Good. Because I'm tired of running. Tired of being alone. And this place, these people, you feel like home. For the first time in my life, I want to stay." Ethan took her hand. "Then stay. We'll figure out the rest as we go." They sat there as darkness fell, watching the lights from the camp, hearing the sounds of laughter and conversation. It wasn't perfect. Cain was still out there. Winter was coming. They'd face hardship and danger and 100 other challenges. But they'd face them together. And somehow that made all the difference. The community stayed for 2 weeks, and in that time, something shifted on the ranch that Ethan couldn't quite name. It wasn't just the repairs that got done, or the extra hands helping with the work. It was the feeling that the land itself had come alive again. Children ran through the yard, while their mothers taught Lena about local plants, and she taught them about healing herbs. Men worked alongside Ethan, sharing stories and advice he'd been too proud to ask for before. Every evening they gathered for meals that felt like celebrations, even though they were just eating stew and bread. "This is what it should have been like all along," Marcus said one night, watching families laugh around the fire. "Before everyone got scared. Before Cain made us all afraid to trust each other." "It can be like this again," Ethan said, "if we choose it." "You really believe that?" "I have to. Otherwise, what are we fighting for?" But the peace could not last forever. Cain was quiet, and that made Ethan nervous. Men like Victor Cain didn't just accept defeat. They regrouped, planned, waited for the perfect moment to strike back. The moment came 3 weeks later. Ethan was in town buying supplies when he saw the notice posted outside the land office. His stomach dropped as he read it. All water rights for Little Creek were being put up for auction. Minimum bid $5,000. Auction date 2 weeks from today. He rode back to the ranch at a full gallop. "They're selling the water rights," he told Lena, showing her the notice. Cain must have convinced the territorial government that the creek is public resource not tied to private land. Can he do that? If he has the right connections, he can do anything. Ethan felt sick. The ranch is worthless without water access, and $5,000, I don't have a tenth of that. Then we raise it. "Lena, we just got out of debt. There's no way." "There's always a way." She stood up, that determined look in her eyes. "We did it before. We can do it again." But Ethan knew the truth. Last time they'd had cattle to sell. This time they had nothing left to leverage. And 2 weeks wasn't enough time to raise $5,000. Cain had finally found the perfect move, and there was no way to counter it. That night, Ethan sat alone in his study, staring at the ledger that showed exactly how impossible this was. Even if he sold everything, every head of cattle, every piece of equipment, the furniture, his wife's jewelry that he'd kept, he might scrape together $1,000. Maybe $1,500 if he was lucky. He was so focused on the numbers that he didn't hear Lena come in. "You can't solve it by staring at it," she said gently. "I can't solve it at all." She sat down across from him. "Tell me the truth. If you lose the water rights, what happens? The ranch dies. Slowly at first I could haul water for a while, maybe make it through the winter. But come summer, when the other sources dry up, I'd have to abandon the land or watch everything die of thirst. And Kane would buy it for nothing. That's his plan. Always has been. He just found a legal way to do it." Lena was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "What if we change the game again?" "There's no game to change. This is an auction. Whoever has the most money wins." "Not if we make sure nobody bids." Ethan looked up. "What?" "Think about it. Kane wants the water rights so he can control everyone. But what if everyone already has access? What if you make a public declaration that anyone who needs water from the creek can take it free of charge forever?" "That's—" Ethan stopped. "That's insane. The water rights are my only leverage." "They're leverage you're about to lose anyway, but if you give them up first voluntarily, you take away Kane's power." Her eyes were bright with the idea. He's not buying water rights anymore. He's just buying the legal right to be cruel, and everyone will know it. It still doesn't stop him from winning the auction. No, but it changes what winning means. Lena leaned forward. "If you make water a public good before the auction, Kane can't use it against anyone. The land might legally belong to whoever buys the rights, but the people won't accept it. They'll take water anyway. They'll organize, fight back. That could lead to violence. Or it could lead to Kane realizing that some things can't be owned. That community is stronger than money." Ethan stared at her. It was crazy. It would mean giving up the one thing that made his ranch valuable. But she was right, he was losing it anyway. At least this way he'd lose it on his own terms. The next morning, Ethan called a town meeting. Every rancher, farmer, and business owner within 30 miles showed up, packing the church until people stood 3 deep along the walls. Ethan stood at the front, his hands shaking slightly as he unfolded the notice about the auction. "Most of you have heard about this by now," he said. "Kane's found a way to auction off the water rights to Little Creek. The auction's in 2 weeks and the minimum bid is $5,000. Murmurs ran through the crowd. That was more money than most of them would see in 5 years. "I can't match that bid," Ethan continued, "but I'm not going to try. Instead, I'm making a different choice." He took a breath. "Effective immediately, I'm declaring that anyone who needs water from Little Creek for their livestock, their families, their land, has my permission to take it. Free of charge, forever." The church went silent. "Kane can buy the legal rights if he wants," Ethan said. "But I'm telling all of you right here, right now, that water belongs to everyone. It always has. And no piece of paper is going to change that." Someone in the back called out, "What if Kane tries to stop us?" "Then we deal with him together. The same way we dealt with Lena's trial. The same way we've dealt with everything else he's thrown at us." Ethan looked around the room. "I'm done being afraid of Victor Kane. And I'm asking all of you to be done too." For a moment, nobody moved. Then Samuel Porter stood up. "I'm with you," he said simply. Another man stood. Then another. Then a woman with 2 children. One by one, people rose until the entire church was standing. Ethan felt something break open in his chest. Not just hope, certainty. They were going to win. Not because they had more money or more power, but because they had something Kane could never buy: each other. The news of Ethan's declaration spread fast. Within days, it had reached the territorial capital. The governor's office sent a representative to investigate a stern woman named Margaret Whitfield, who showed up at the ranch with a briefcase full of questions. "Mr. Cole," she said, sitting across from him at the kitchen table, "you understand that you can't just give away water rights that don't legally belong to you. I understand that people need water to live, and I'm not letting Kane hold that over anyone's head. Your intentions are admirable, but the law is being used to steal from honest people," Ethan interrupted. And I'm done pretending that's acceptable. Whitfield studied him for a long moment. Then she said, "Tell me about Victor Kane." So Ethan did. He told her about the suspicious loans, the bought witnesses, the poisoned cattle. Told her about every rancher Kane had forced off their land, every family he'd destroyed in his quest for control. Lena joined them halfway through, adding details Ethan had forgotten. The inspector who'd been sent to harass her. The trial built on perjured testimony. The systematic intimidation of anyone who stood up to Kane. When they finished, Whitfield was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "I'm going to need sworn statements from everyone willing to testify." About what? About Kane's activities. If even half of what you're telling me is true, he's broken multiple territorial laws, bribery, intimidation, possibly conspiracy. She pulled out papers. The governor's been hearing complaints about land grabs in this region for months, but nobody would go on record. Everyone was too scared. They're not scared anymore, Lena said quietly. Whitfield looked at her. Then now's the time to act, before Kane realizes what's happening and covers his tracks. Over the next week, Whitfield interviewed 40 people. Every story was different, but the pattern was the same. Kane using fear and money to control the county, destroying anyone who got in his way. The sworn statements filled a file 2 inches thick. "This is enough," Whitfield said, closing her briefcase. "The governor will want to review it personally, but I believe we have grounds for a full investigation into Mr. Kane's business practices." "How long will that take?" Ethan asked. "Months, possibly. But in the meantime, I'm recommending that the water rights auction be postponed pending the outcome of the investigation." Ethan felt hope surge. "You can do that. The governor can. And given what I've heard here, I believe he will." She stood. "Mr. Cole, what you did making water a public resource, it complicated things legally. But it also made it impossible for Kane to profit from the auction. You forced us to look at the bigger picture." After she left, Lena turned to Ethan. "We might actually win this," she said, wonder in her voice. "Don't celebrate yet. Kane's not done fighting." "Neither are we." She was right. But Ethan was starting to realize that winning didn't mean destroying Kane. It meant building something he couldn't tear down. And they'd already started. The auction date came and went with no auction. The governor's office announced a formal investigation into irregularities in land and water rights transactions in the territory. Kane's name wasn't mentioned, but everyone knew who they meant. 3 days later, the bank quietly forgave several outstanding loans to ranchers who'd been on the edge of foreclosure. Ethan heard through Samuel that the territorial government had pressured them, threatening to investigate their relationship with Kane. A week after that, Judge Parker announced he wouldn't seek re-election. The rumor was he'd been given a choice: retire quietly or face an ethics investigation. Kane's empire wasn't collapsing, but it was cracking. And every crack made it easier for people to breathe. One evening, Ethan and Lena were walking along the creek when they saw riders approaching. His hand went to his gun, but Lena caught his arm. "Wait," she said. It was Kane. Alone this time, no hired men flanking him. He looked older somehow, the sharp edges worn down. He stopped his horse a respectful distance away. "Cole," he said. "Miss Hart." "Kane." Ethan kept his voice neutral. "I came to talk. Just talk. That's all." "So talk." Kane dismounted slowly. "I'm leaving, selling my holdings here and moving to California. The investigation, even if nothing comes of it, my reputation's ruined in this territory." "Good," Lena said simply. Kane almost smiled. "I don't expect forgiveness or understanding, but I wanted you to know that I underestimated both of you. I thought breaking you would be simple, but you didn't break." "Because we weren't alone," Ethan said. "Yes, I see that now." Kane looked at the creek, the land, the ranch in the distance. "I spent 20 years building an empire, and you destroyed it with community, with people choosing to care about each other. It's..." He shook his head. "It's humbling." "Is that an apology?" Lena asked. It's an acknowledgement. The world's changing. Men like me were going to be left behind. He climbed back on his horse, started to ride away. Then he stopped and looked back. "Take care of this place," he said. "It matters more than I ever understood." Then he was gone, disappearing down the road toward town. Ethan stood there trying to process what had just happened. "Did we just win?" he asked. Lena took his hand. "I think we did." Winter came gentle that year. The ranch thrived in ways Ethan had almost forgotten were possible. The cattle were healthy, the fences held, the land yielded enough to get them through the cold months, with some left over. But more than that, the community that had formed during the crisis didn't dissolve. People kept coming by, helping with work, sharing resources, treating the ranch as a gathering place. Lena's informal medical practice became an open secret that nobody bothered to report. The new territorial doctor, when he arrived, took one look at what she was doing and said, "Keep it up. We need all the help we can get out here." She started teaching other women, properly passing on everything her mother had taught her. Not practicing medicine that was still illegal, but sharing knowledge. Empowering people to care for themselves and each other. One evening in late February, Ethan found her in the kitchen organizing herbs and making notes in a journal. "What are you working on?" he asked. "A record. Everything I know about healing written down so it doesn't get lost." She looked up at him. "I've been thinking about what happens after I'm gone. Who carries on the work?" "You're not going anywhere. Not anytime soon. But someday," she smiled. "I want to make sure that what I've learned helps people long after I'm not here to teach it myself." Ethan sat down across from her. "You've changed this place, you know. Changed me." "We changed each other," she corrected. "You taught me I didn't have to keep running, that I could trust people, build something that lasts. I taught you that. You showed me every day." She reached across the table, took his hand. "Ethan, I want to ask you something." "Anything." "What are we to each other?" He'd been wondering when she'd ask that. They'd danced around it for months now, calling each other partners, but meaning something deeper. "I don't know the right words," he admitted. "But you're everything to me. The reason I wake up in the morning, the reason I fight, the reason I believe the future might actually be better than the past. That's how I feel too." She squeezed his hand. "So maybe we should stop calling it partnership and start calling it what it is." "What is it?" "Love," she said simply. "I love you, Ethan Cole, and I think you love me too." He felt tears prick his eyes. "I do. God help me, I do." "Then that's settled." She stood up, came around the table, and kissed him. It was gentle and sure, and felt like coming home after a long journey. When they broke apart, she said, "I think we should get married." Ethan laughed, surprised. "Are you proposing to me?" "Someone has to. You're too traditional to do it yourself." "I was working up to it." "How long would that have taken?" "Another year, maybe 2. She shook her head, smiling. "We've wasted enough time being careful. Life's too short. So yes, I'm proposing. Will you marry me, Ethan Cole?" "Yes," he said, pulling her close. "Yes, I will." They were married in April, in the same church where the community had stood up for Lena during her trial. Half the county showed up. Samuel gave Lena away. Marcus served as Ethan's best man. The children from town threw wildflowers instead of rice. It was simple and perfect and exactly what both of them needed. Afterward, at the celebration on the ranch, Samuel pulled Ethan aside. "You did good," he said. "Both of you. Built something real here. We had help. That's the point, isn't it? That's what you taught us. That asking for help isn't weakness. That standing together beats standing alone every time." Ethan looked around at all the people laughing, dancing, celebrating. Saw Lena surrounded by women who'd become her friends. Saw children playing in the yard that had been silent for so long. Saw a future that was bright instead of dark. "She saved me," he said quietly. "I was drowning, and I didn't even know it. Then she showed up and reminded me what living felt like. And you saved her right back, gave her a home, a community, a reason to stop running. Samuel clapped him on the shoulder. That's what love is supposed to do. Make both people better than they were alone. That night, after everyone had left and the ranch was quiet again, Ethan and Lena stood on the porch watching the stars. Happy, he asked. Happier than I've ever been, she said. I keep waiting for something to go wrong, for it all to fall apart. It won't. How do you know? Because we won't let it, and because we've got a whole community backing us up now. He pulled her closer. We're not alone anymore, Lena. We don't have to be. She leaned against him and he felt her relax in a way she never had before. Like she'd finally stopped waiting for the next disaster. Like she'd finally let herself believe this was real. I used to think my life would always be temporary, she said. That I'd never find a place I belonged. But this is permanent. This is home. This is home, he agreed. For both of us. Forever. They stood there as night deepened around them. Two people who'd been broken finding wholeness in each other. The ranch stretched out before them, solid and enduring. The community they'd built surrounded them stronger than any wall. The future waited uncertain, but hopeful. Ethan thought about how it had all started. With a quiet woman stepping off a stagecoach carrying nothing but a worn bag and 3 simple words. I can cook. Those words had changed everything. Had saved his ranch, his life, his soul. Had brought a community together, had proven that sometimes the people the world overlooked were exactly the ones holding everything together. And sometimes all it took was one chance, one moment of choosing to see someone, instead of dismissing them to turn survival into something worth living for. Lena had been right from the very beginning. She could cook. But she could do so much more than that. She could heal, she could build, she could love. She could transform a dying ranch into a thriving home. And Ethan had learned something just as important, that accepting help, trusting others, and building community weren't signs of weakness. They were the foundation of real strength. They'd faced everything together: debt, persecution, corruption, fear, and they'd won. Not because they were special, or lucky, or blessed, but because they'd chosen to care about each other, to fight for what mattered, to believe that ordinary people, doing ordinary kindness, could change the world. Ethan looked at his wife, at the ranch they'd saved, at the life they'd built from ashes and hope. This was everything he'd thought he'd lost forever. Everything he'd stopped believing in after Sarah died. Purpose. Joy. A reason to wake up every morning with something other than dread. Lena had given him all of that with 3 words and a lifetime of quiet courage. And now, standing on this porch with the woman he loved, and the future spread out before them, Ethan Cole knew one thing with absolute certainty: they were going to be just fine.